10 years ago, I could not put my phone down. I struggled with what many teens, including mine, struggle with today. I couldn't put my phone down. My kids had recently introduced me to the game of Pokemon. And I allowed them to use my phone to discover where one of those virtual creatures were and then capture it. It was a great way to get them to go out for a walk and get exercise, but they wanted to keep checking my small screen rather than notice everything else around us. But then, after a few weeks, I found myself checking it when I wasn't with them, whether I was on the walk to work, going to meetings outside of church, even during a family vacation to celebrate my parents' 50th anniversary. Each morning, I had my solo walk near the beach, but I was paying attention to the beauty. Was I paying attention to the beauty of my surroundings? Kind of. But I was on my phone much of the time. It was as if I was addicted. On one level, it was soothing and satisfying, but on another, one which I have reached plenty in the past, I was not accessing the depth of my own experience. In seminary, I had developed my own unique definition for spirituality. For me, spirituality at its core is our human ability to cultivate an ever greater capacity for sustained attention. To cultivate an ever greater capacity for sustained attention. In other words, spiritual practice, whatever it is that you choose to do regularly, whether you really want to or not, increases your capacity to pay attention to what's going on within you, around you, beyond you. And by expanding our capacity to pay attention, spiritual practice helps us learn how to move through the world more skillfully, intentionally. And today, technology is the greatest obstacle to cultivating this kind of spirituality. 10 years ago, ironically, the same time I was playing Pokemon Go, Adam Gazzaley and Larry Rosen, a neuroscientist and a psychologist, published The Distracted Mind: Ancient Brains in a High-Tech Society. They explained why our brains aren't built for multitasking and suggest how we can learn to live with technology in a more balanced way. Recent studies suggest Americans typically pick up their cell phones between 144 and 300 times a day, essentially every 3 to 5 minutes while awake. 90% of Americans check their phones within the first 10 minutes of waking up, and spending an average of 4.5 hours a day on their phones. And nearly half surveyed believe that they are addicted to their cell phones. And 10 years ago, I was one of them. On one level, I knew it, but I didn't really want to admit it. To admit that I had exchanged some of my spiritual practice and being aware of what's really going on within and around me for that odd thrill of catching all the more interesting Pokemon wherever I found myself. Now, I know something about spiritual practice, even austere spiritual practice. I once had a daily Zen meditation practice for 9 years, sitting 30 minutes every day. In seminary, I first tried meditating when I took a class from Joanna Macy, and it was a requirement to meditate daily. And I got up really early and sat with Joanna Macy and a few others at 5:30 in the morning, twice a week. But on other days, I just couldn't make the time to sit every single day for 30 minutes. I just couldn't do it. It wasn't until I moved across the country for my internship in ministry, and the congregation's vice president happened to be a Zen teacher. And he offered meditation on Monday nights, and because I had a complete change of routine, I managed to sit for 30 minutes virtually each and every day for 9 years. It was nearly 2 years into my marriage when my wife asked if perhaps I could just stay in bed and cuddle some mornings. And so I asked my Zen teacher about this because I was struggling with this request. And he said, "Why don't you try it and see what happens?" I did. And that was the end of my daily Zen practice. So I know we don't typically share such details with people beyond our family, but I'm doing so for multiple reasons. One, to model vulnerability in my spiritual community, for we are here for the sake of aiding each other in our moral and religious and spiritual development. And there's nothing more critical than collectively cultivating our capacity for sustained attention. But secondly, I share these things because they're real. And I believe the more real we become with ourselves and with those who we love and trust, then the more effectively we can support one another and live intentionally in the wider world. The poet Mary Oliver says, "This is the first, wildest, and wisest thing I know, that the soul exists and that it is built entirely out of attentiveness." She also wrote, "Attention is the beginning of devotion." Attention is the beginning of devotion. That's a way of saying that you cannot love something or someone that you don't really encounter. Love is made possible by deep noticing. Now, the word attention comes from the Latin ad, which means toward, and tendere, which means to stretch. So attention means to stretch toward. Now, tendere is also the root for our word tender. So attention implies reaching towards something out of tenderness, out of love. And similarly, the way we stretch ourselves tenderly towards something changes us. And doing this regularly makes us more capable of loving. We have more moments of insight, perhaps a sense of being at one with everything, or an awareness of participating in the sacred dance of life and how that brings us alive. And such awareness is typically fleeting for most of us. It is not something we can bottle up or grasp onto, but it is possible to increase the frequency and the duration of such insights and experiences through mindfulness practices. And I know some people access this through regular exercise, others through knitting, and still others through prayer. And whatever the practice, it is something we did regularly, including on days we don't really want to, because that's what makes it a genuine practice. According to neuroscience researchers, the simplest definition for attention is the process by which the mind chooses among various stimuli that strike the senses at any given moment. Late in the 19th century, philosopher William James said, "My experience is what I agree to attend to." And here in the 21st century, a huge portion of our population agree to attend to constant streams of information and specific streams of information. And this is having a real effect on not only the quality of our lives, but our capacity to pay attention to what is truly important and what really is. As a minister, I have noticed that we human beings are often more capable of paying greater attention at certain points in our lives, such as when the strain is heaviest. We human beings either freak out or we shift into a deeper gear, such that we become more attentive to what is really going on, what is truly important. It's those times when we're suddenly stripped down raw and vulnerable that our capacity to see more clearly suddenly snaps forth. I personally have had surprisingly profound insights when enduring an especially challenging illness, or when that madness in the soul gets so strong, rather than freaking out all the more, I ground, I get clearer, and recognize that we're in a crazy time. And it may be a long haul. It may not be a long haul, but I fear there will be others who must suffer greatly, even lose their lives before our country recognizes together that what's happening is absolutely not okay. Today, I want you to consider that we, as human beings, are shaped by what we pay attention to. And it behooves us to become conscious through some kind of intentional practice, such as mindfulness reflection. The word for mindfulness in Sanskrit is sati. Sati means not only mindfulness, but awareness and remembering. Remembering to focus on what cultivates our capacity for sustained attention. This practice of mindfulness is about noticing how the mind can get so distracted and bringing it back to the present and the awareness of the present moment. I haven't played Pokemon Go for years now, but I still check my phone much more frequently than I'd care to admit. I check news sites like the Times, the Tribune, the BBC, sometimes without even realizing what I'm doing. I go on to my phone to check my calendar and notice someone has texted me. And my mind is hoodwinked. And a couple minutes later, I realize I never checked my calendar. In the past, I used to have notifications come up on my phone telling me one thing happened or another, headlines. And I encourage you to turn those off. You don't have to know what's happening this second every time something awful happens. It just distracts us all the more. And an extraordinary gift of mindfulness meditation is developing the capacity to simply witness what's going on in our minds without putting a value judgment on it. And when anxiety suddenly pops up, we say, oh, there's anxiety. And simply breathe and continue to show up and pay attention. But mindfulness is not ultimately an inward-looking experience. It is opening to what is. And some of us are especially prone to distraction. Some of us are prone to negative thoughts eating away at our self-confidence. Some of us are prone to anxiety. And all of us can cultivate greater capacity to attend to ourselves and our lives with more honesty and clarity. And isn't that what our mental health ministry is ultimately about? And the most wonderful gift any of us can give another is our undivided attention. Because in that gift, another can flower. And what a gift it is when we receive that. But we can't offer that gift if our brains have developed the habits of multitasking and getting distracted by the various notifications of our devices. Cultivating mindfulness is key. Some of you have already shared with me how you hope we could have a mindfulness gathering here on a weekly or monthly basis. Or could there be a gathering of a few people? And as someone who has struggled with mindfulness myself, and grappled them in my own home, and have a history of engaging, promoting spiritual practice, I'd love to be of support. Because ultimately, it's how we are with ourselves, with one another, with what's happening in our communities, that defines who we are. And if we're fully present, we can make the choices that are in line with our deepest values. And knowing we'll inevitably flub up and then catch ourselves and come to invite one another ever more into being the kind of people we strive to be. Such a sacred opportunity. One that I am deeply grateful to be a part. Together, may we be a blessing to one another and our wider community. Blessed be. Amen.
Visit us at uusg.org.